Il est 17 heures bientôt, nous allons entamer le point 7 sur l'utilisation des ressources du Fonds du patrimoine culturel immatériel. Il s'agit du document ETH 28.GA7 Rêve, ETH 28.GA INF 7. Nous procéderons à l'examen. Sorry. Il n'est pas dans mon dossier. Il n'est pas chez moi. Après le marteau. Alors, je crois comprendre, on vient de me signaler que nous allons maintenant avoir un bref rapport oral du Forum des ONG. En raison des difficultés actuelles liées au déplacement, le Forum des ONG interviendra avec une vidéo préenregistrée. Avec votre permission, nous allons vous montrer cette vidéo. Merci.
Distinguished delegates of the state parties to the 2003 Convention and UNESCO's Secretariat, I direct this message on behalf of the Steering Committee of the ICH NGO Forum and the accredited organizations that work actively within the communities and barriers of ICH. We are facing unprecedented challenges in the modern history of humanity. The world is learning and adapting to this new reality. ICH barriers and their communities are no exception. However, we wish to emphasize in these difficult times that the 2003 Convention is above all a celebration of life. Individuals and communities transmit knowledge, skills, and techniques from one generation to another, learn and enrich their legacy with contributions from other cultures. We are the story that has been told through time, the song that echoes at each end of the earth and reminds us that we are one humanity. The agenda of this session is rich. Therefore, please allow us to take this opportunity to address only 3 items. Item 9, ICH in emergency. The COVID-19 has put the whole world suddenly in a state of emergency. The world is using now much more online communication tools, and these could be very useful in coping with the pandemic, including various capacity building actions, in which NGOs could and should be acknowledged as one of the key partners in safeguarding ICH. UNESCO's platform on living heritage experiences under the pandemic clearly testifies to an important role played by ICH NGOs. Regarding online communications, we also like to stress that communities and other stakeholders have different capacities in accessing digital tools. In this regard, we would appreciate if GA might consider to expand the scope of the ICH Fund, which you will address under Agenda Item 7, to help resilience of ICH under the pandemic, in particular ICH of more vulnerable indigenous and majority communities, as well as to decrease digital divide in our increasingly interconnected world. Item 11, update on the reflection on the reform of the listing mechanisms of the Convention. This issue the ICH NGO Forum has worked a lot with. Therefore, we shall present our specific suggestions later on during this meeting within our intervention on Agenda Item 11. We kindly ask the distinguished delegates to consult our specific suggestions on this matter at the ICH NGO Forum website. Item 12, update on the reflection on the participation of non-governmental organizations in the implementation of the Convention. Concerning the participation of NGOs in the Convention, we very much welcome the ongoing reflection on this matter. Let us emphasize that since the last General Assembly, the ICH NGO Forum has developed and adopted its bylaws and code of conduct, including the recognition of various advisory functions that NGOs may play and do play in safeguarding ICH apart from the services in the evaluation body. The development of policies to overcome geographical imbalance of accredited NGOs and the all-over strengthening of structure, activities and collaboration between ICH NGOs. ICH NGO Forum is an association of accredited NGOs that encourages plurality of expertise and fair and equal participation among different NGOs and regions. Therefore, we wish to reaffirm that the ICH NGO Forum advocates and operates in favor of plurality, diversity and participation. We are happy that this positive development has been recognized by the committee, which include the report on our activities as separate agenda item at its next 15th session. Finally, I want to thank you for your attention. We, as 157 accredited NGOs, plus those that are expected to be confirmed at this session, are closely following your deliberations and decisions. We will discuss them at our online session scheduled for the 14th of September. You are welcome to join us. We wish you a successful General Assembly. Thank you. Merci.
Merci infiniment. Nous vous remercions pour le partage de cette vidéo. Nous sommes impressionnés par l'étendue du travail mené par le Forum des ONG du PCI. Nous aimerions saisir cette opportunité pour remercier les ONG de poursuivre leurs efforts. Les ONG jouent un rôle crucial dans la mise en œuvre de la Convention au niveau national et international. Cela étant, je pense que nous pouvons maintenant définitivement passer au point suivant. C'est la fin de ce point 6. Merci. Comme je vous l'ai dit tout à l'heure, ce point 7 concerne les ressources, l'utilisation des ressources du Fonds du patrimoine culturel et immatériel, les documents que je vous avais déjà cités. Nous procéderons à l'examen et à l'adoption du projet du plan d'utilisation des ressources du Fonds du PCI pour les 2 prochaines années. Cette proposition nous est transmise par le comité intergouvernemental suite à sa dernière session en vertu de ses fonctions définies à l'article 7 de la Convention. Je n'en dirai pas plus et j'invite le malheureux secrétaire à introduire ce point de l'ordre du jour. Monsieur le secrétaire, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. So I will start by presenting the recent trends in the use of the fund. As you will see in the report, during the 2018 and 2019 biennium, the total income of the fund increased by 5% compared to the previous biennium, reaching around 5.1 million. This increase was due mainly to the increase of interests and of assessed contributions, which compensated the 28% sharp decline in voluntary supplementary contributions. Meanwhile, as you can see on the graph shown on the screens and which is in the document, the expenditures, which are the orange line, are on the increase and surpass for the first time the 5 million. This represents 149% of the compulsory assessed contributions due for 2018 and 2019, shown in the dark blue line. The expenditure rate at the end of this biennium reached 63%, being the highest expenditure rate of the fund since 2010. Now, not to worry at this stage, because that's a good thing, because a few years ago, you will remember, we were in a situation where the fund was increasing without being expended, and that was due to relatively low implementation of international assistance. So even though we have above 100% of what came in during the biennium, there is the leftover from previous. So, as you can see on the screens, the increase on the use of the fund is directly linked to the increased implementation of the international assistance mechanisms, meaning the fund is doing what it should be doing. Compared to 2016 and to 2017, Expenditures for international assistance more than doubled to reach 2.9 million, and as a result, the fund balance at the end of the last biennium, indicated in the dotted line, decreased from 8.6 million at the end of 2017 to 7.8 million at the end of 2019. So overall, the financial situation of the fund is sound from an operational point of view. States have an increased capacity to access funds that support safeguarding programs and projects. The Secretariat now has an improved ability to respond to their requests, thanks to the newly created Safeguarding Implementation and Monitoring Team. And the detailed figures for this can be seen in document LHE 20/8GA/INF7. Some expenditures are on the increase. Since expenditures are on the increase, of course, the funds available to support states will likely diminish in the future. This is not an immediate concern, and indeed we should be aiming at having the fund fully implemented each cycle, but this reality indicates that voluntary contributions will become more important in the future to support the implementation both at the international level, but also very specifically at the national level. So in short, while we are addressing the problem and we can see over the last 4 years concrete and real results, this will create a new need for voluntary supplementary contributions. So allow me to come to the part concerning the future plan for the implementation of the fund in 2020 and 2021. And for this, you should refer to Annex 1. We have Annex 1. So this is the plan expressed in percentages, I believe, and with an indicative amount. This session of the General Assembly is asked to approve the draft plan endorsed by the committee at its 14th session in 2019. This plan covers a period of 24 months, 2020 to 21, as well as the first 6 months of 2022. The budget for the first 6 months of 2022 corresponds to 1/4 of the budget for the period 2020 to 2021. I remind you that we need to foresee the first 6 months of 2022 because the General Assembly only meets in June. And indeed, this year we had problems because we were not able to meet in June, and I will explain to you later. So we are not fully in line with UNESCO's house-wide budgeting, which usually where the General Assembly, the General Conference would meet in November, or even another convention like the 1972 would meet in November. So we need to advance the 6 months in this way. Compared to the previous plan, the budget lines remain identical in scope. Percentages are applied to the balance of the fund as of 31st of December 2019. That is approximately 7.8 million United States dollars. In line with the priorities of the fund defined in the operational directives, the majority of the resources would be allocated to providing international assistance to states parties, which are budget lines 1, 1.1 and 2. The combined percentage of these 3 lines, which represent 64.75% of the fund, remains the same as during the previous biennium. The slight decrease proposed for budget line 1, minus 0.59%, and budget line 2, minus 2%, will offset the necessary increase of budget line 1.1, which is required to maintain the nominal amount needed to cover the costs of the 3 extra budgetary fixed-term posts created in 2018 at the last session of the General Assembly. Budget line 3, other functions of the committee, will be maintained at 20% of the total approved budget. This line is dedicated to upstream work at the global level, which allows for the implementation of projects and programs at national and regional levels through voluntary contributions. In 2019, the committee requested in its decision 14-7 that a percentage breakdown be submitted to the present session of the General Assembly under budget line 3 of the plan, other functions of the committee, in terms of expected results as per the approved C5. This breakdown is provided in Annex 1, along with a narrative description of the 4 results under this budget line, paragraphs 16 to 32. Therefore, as you can see, and perhaps you can scroll up, the funds allocated to this budget line will be specifically dedicated. Can we go up? No, I think it's scrolled down. I might have, it's the other fund, that's the ER1, ER2, ER3, yes, the other way, thank you. The funds allocated to this budget line will be specifically dedicated to the capacity building program, 33%, the integration of ICH into development plans, policies, and programs, with a particular focus on education and on the safeguarding of ICH in emergency situations. That represents 13%, and I remember it's 13% of the 20%, which means, where is it? Yeah, which means 2.6% of the fund, sorry. The improvement in the management of knowledge, information, and monitoring of the convention, 27%, and the promotion of the objectives of the convention through awareness raising and outreach, again, 27%. The budget lines 4, 5, 6, and 7 will be maintained in general at their respective percentages, with slight adjustments based on the experience of the current biennium. As was the case in the previous biennium for budget lines 4, 5, and 6, and as recommended by the committee, the present draft decision proposes that the Secretariat be authorized to operate transfers between budget lines 4, 5, 6, and 7 up to 30% of their initial total allocation. This flexibility allows the Secretariat to respond to as many requests for financial assistance as possible across the different categories of participants. So these lines are for different categories of participants to attend statutory meetings, and with this flexibility, if we have too many demands in one category as opposed to another, we can then adjust to include them. Further to the proposed plan for 2021, I would like to bring to the attention of the GA 4 specific issues that are reflected in the draft resolution and are specific to this year's working document. Firstly, due to the postponement of the present session of the GA from June to September 2020, we faced a risk of disruption in our operations after June 30th, 2020, as the pre-approved budget for 6 months was until the end of June. Therefore, as an intermediary measure, the Secretariat extended the validity of the approved budget for the first 6 months of 2020 until the present session could be convened, so another 3 months. This extension does not affect or did not affect the overall budget approved by the GA at its last session for the first 6 months of 2020 and does not impact percentages proposed in the plan. In other words, we used the money foreseen for 6 months and made it extend an extra 3 months, but so that we could still access it. Based on this experience, the draft resolution proposes for the GA to authorize the Secretariat to proceed with a similar extension in 2022 in the hopefully unlikely event that the 9th session of the GA is unable to meet prior to the 30th of June 2022. Secondly, the draft resolution 8GA proposes amendments to the financial regulations of the fund. This is in response to 2 decisions of UNESCO's Executive Board in 2016 and 2017, calling for the alignment of the financial regulations of all UNESCO special accounts. These revisions are presented in Annex 3 as a comparison with the current regulations. For clarity, Annex 2 presents the regulations integrating the proposed amendments. We might note that, in fact, these proposed revisions do not bring major changes to the functioning of the fund. They clarify the current practice in terms of governance of the fund under Article 4 and the biennial reporting to the General Assembly and the Committee under Article 10. As recommended by the Committee in 2019, the draft resolution also proposes the continued application of a management cost rate of 0% for all assessed contributions to the fund and apply a rate of 7% for all other contributions. This continued application of 0% management cost rate for the assessed contributions is consistent with the practice applied for assessed contributions to the World Heritage Fund. The fourth and last specific issue concerns the sub-fund for enhancing the human resources of the Secretariat, established in 2010. Following the request of the committee last year, the draft resolution proposes an updated target for the sub-fund, which would be set at 950,000 per year against the 1.1 million, which is the target at present. May I remind you that this target has never come close to being met, and we do encourage states, those states that can, to consider, please, contributing to this sub-fund to enhance the human resources of the Secretariat. This target is based on what we consider the actual costs incurred by the Secretariat for the temporary posts necessary for fulfilling what are indeed core obligations for the functioning of the Convention. Before ending, I'm pleased to inform you of positive developments regarding support to the Convention in various forms since the beginning of the year. This is just an oral report of some of the good news we've had since the beginning of the year, which are not in the report because they don't strictly follow the financial reporting. I'd like to begin by thanking France, Azerbaijan, and Switzerland, who have all recently made earmarked contributions to the fund in support of the capacity building program. For the sub-fund for enhancing the human resources of the Secretariat, support has been received from Lithuania, and arrangements are being finalized from contributions from Monaco and the municipality of Cremona in Italy. I would also like to thank Italy for a contribution to the Venice office to support the regional network of experts on intangible cultural heritage in Southeast Europe. We received, furthermore, additional appropriations to the regular program from three partners, being the International Information and Networking Center for Intangible Cultural Heritage in Asia-Pacific region, ICHCAP. And this is to pursue the creation of a massive online course on living heritage and sustainable development. We also received support from the Category 2 Center in Peru, Crespial. The Netherlands has provided further support to continue developing the Secretariat's initiative, Dive into Intangible Cultural Heritage. And the Regional Center for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage in Southeastern Europe provided some support for the organization of the 14th annual meeting of Southeast European Expert Network on Intangible Cultural Heritage. I mentioned those, they will be reflected in the next report in 2 years, but these are support since the beginning of the year. Sorry, I forgot to mention that the Chengdu Culture and Tourism Development Group also gave support through the Bangkok office, through a funds and trust mechanism for the initiative Safeguarding Intangible Cultural Heritage in Formal Education in Asia and the Pacific. We are very grateful to all of these partners for their generous commitment in support to the work of the Secretary, and which will, as I mentioned, be recognized in future statutory documents. Monsieur le Président, j'arrive à la fin de ma présentation et je suis bien sûr prêt à répondre aux questions qu'il pourrait y avoir, et je suis aussi accompagné avec le chef avec BSP, notamment Monsieur Ebri Massar. Merci.
Merci, M. Curtis, pour cette présentation détaillée du plan que l'Assemblée générale est appelée maintenant à examiner, ainsi que des points saillants du projet de résolution. Avant d'aborder le plan et la résolution, je voudrais proposer un débat général et donner l'opportunité aux États parties de poser leurs questions, éventuellement des éclaircissements ou leur approbation. La salle, vous avez la parole. Nous allons ouvrir la liste des États qui souhaiteraient prendre la parole. Pour le moment, nous avons Cuba, République tchèque, Arménie, République de Corée, Panama. La liste reste ouverte. les Émirats arabes unis. Cuba, vous avez la parole.
Gracias, señor presidente. Deseamos agradecer al señor Tim Curtis y a la Secretaría por la calidad del informe presentado. Agradecemos también toda la información suplementaria que se ha brindado a partir de las solicitudes que venía haciendo el comité y esta asamblea. Cuba desea agradecer y reconocer el apoyo que hemos recibido de parte de la Secretaría en la implementación del proyecto sobre el inventario del patrimonio inmaterial en Guantánamo, la región más oriental y montañosa de Cuba, con complejas dificultades, y hemos recibido y hemos tenido el acompañamiento de la Secretaría, independientemente de las complejas situaciones en que hemos tenido para implementar el proyecto, agudizadas ahora con la crisis del COVID, pero quiero resaltar que hemos tenido un acompañamiento y una presencia desde Secretaría todo el tiempo en la implementación de este proyecto. Acogemos con satisfacción también cómo se pide en este informe que dos temas relativos al fortalecimiento de capacidades y la salvaguardia del patrimonio en la educación formal y no formal continúen en el centro de atención del fondo de la Convención. Es un tema de especial importancia. Quería hacer referencia entonces a que me gustaría, un poco aprovechando que también está el ADG de Cultura, cómo se vincularía esto con un proyecto de gran importancia para la región de América Latina, que es el proyecto Transcultura, que es un polo de formación regional para la cultura, donde habrá un grupo de instituciones que estará formando en diferentes ámbitos para la región del Caribe. Es un proyecto con la Unión Europea, la UNESCO, Cuba y el Caribe, y creo que podría ser una plataforma importante para también trabajar los temas de la educación superior en el patrimonio inmaterial. Habrán instituciones que de hecho ya tienen incorporados en sus programas de estudios de nivel superior y de posgrado los temas del patrimonio inmaterial, y sería importante crear sinergias de trabajo a partir de este proyecto regional y transregional que es Transcultura. En este sentido, nos gustaría también conocer un poco cómo estos fondos que han sido presentados, cómo van a apoyar un poco la labor que desde el terreno se hace en la implementación de la Convención. Conocemos que el sector de cultura retiene dentro de la sede un gran porcentaje de su presupuesto debido a los mecanismos de implementación de las convenciones, pero queremos ver cómo esto va a tener una expresión en las oficinas regionales dedicadas a cultura o en las oficinas regionales que desarrollan programas y actividades. Quizás para próximos informes sería oportuno también poder visualizar cuál va a ser el impacto de este presupuesto en el terreno. Y también quizás me gustaría conocer un poco más sobre la política de recuperación de fondos. Justamente la próxima sesión del Consejo Ejecutivo estará revisando también los porcentajes y todo este sistema, y quizás VSP nos podría explicar un poco más, porque veo que se adopta hasta un 7% de esa política de recuperación de costos, que también tiene un impacto importante, y ver cómo se refleja en las oficinas en el terreno una vez que son implementadores de estos programas, sobre todo porque entiendo que un nuevo mecanismo de piloto para la implementación de algunos proyectos también los estaría vinculando en la implementación de los proyectos. Muchísimas gracias.
Merci beaucoup. La République tchèque.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Un document comme celui-ci me rappelle pourquoi je n'ai pas fait d'études de comptabilité. Néanmoins, nous voudrions remercier le secrétariat pour la préparation de ce rapport complexe et nous nous félicitons, entre autres, d'une meilleure utilisation du mécanisme d'assistance internationale qui sert de nombreux États parties à travers le monde pour promouvoir la sauvegarde du PCI et mettre en œuvre des projets qui y contribuent. Nous nous félicitons de la mise en place des 3 nouveaux emplois pour une durée déterminée financés par des contributions financières extra-budgétaires, car sans les capacités suffisantes du secrétariat, il ne serait pas facile d'accompagner les projets d'assistance internationale vers une mise en œuvre réussie. En fonction de la situation, la délégation salue le bon état du Fonds du patrimoine culturel immatériel. Il ressort du document qu'il est géré de manière efficace et transparente, et nous remercions les pays qui y ont contribué. Le document nous montre également qu'il y a toujours un certain nombre de contributions obligatoires impayées et nous nous demandons s'il ne serait pas bénéfique de connaître les raisons de ce non-paiement des contributions obligatoires pour y remédier et trouver une solution créative à cette situation. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Merci. L'Arménie.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La délégation de l'Arménie se félicite tout d'abord que les lignes budgétaires soumises à notre attention donnent une priorité à l'assistance internationale. Elle remercie le secrétariat pour son action menée en faveur d'un accroissement de la mise en œuvre des mécanismes d'assistance internationale. Elle se réjouit également du renforcement de ses ressources humaines en vue de répondre au mieux aux attentes des États membres. Dans le cadre du plan d'utilisation des ressources du Fonds qui est présenté, ces délégations estiment que le résultat 2 ayant trait à la mise en œuvre de la Convention dans les États membres grâce au programme de renforcement des capacités doit demeurer une priorité. Elle prend bonne note de l'évaluation faite par le secrétariat faisant ressortir l'impact de la crise de la Covid-19 sur le déploiement de ce programme et appelle le secrétariat à effectuer les adaptations nécessaires, notamment en continuant à avoir recours à des formations en ligne. S'agissant de l'utilisation de ces ressources, la délégation de l'Arménie souhaite réitérer dans ce cadre-ci son soutien à la priorité Afrique de l'organisation et forme le vœu que les demandes d'assistance émanant de ces pays ou des petits États insulaires en développement fassent si possible l'objet d'un examen favorable. La délégation de l'Arménie appuie le projet de résolution soumis à notre attention. Elle remercie tous les contributeurs ayant apporté leur soutien à la Convention. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. La République de Corée.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. We noted with appreciation that the use of International Assistance Fund has been increased by 116% compared to last biennium. This indicates that the effort made for the efficient and purposeful use of the fund has been successful, and we thank both the committee and the Secretariat on this result. We have also noted the decline in the unspent fund for the past decade. This is a positive sign of the capacity building for both the state parties and the committee. We would like to request the Secretariat to continue its efforts to deploy efficient management of the Convention Fund while taking into account program continuity, quality improvement, and sustainability. Furthermore, we think that the voluntary contributions reserved for priority tasks such as sustainable development and education need to be increased further, and in this regard, the Korean government's support is under consideration. Lastly, we recognize the necessity of expanding the Secretariat's human resources so that it can better respond to the needs and increasing demands from the state parties. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Merci beaucoup. Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente. Quiero agradecerle al señor Curtis por el informe presentado, pero yo sugeriría la próxima vez que este informe sea el último en la agenda de estas asambleas. Escuchando las intervenciones de esta mañana y de esta tarde y con la agenda que tenemos, supongo que va a haber una serie de otros temas que van a generar gastos sobre los cuales no sabemos cómo se van a pagar. Me parece que, además de las gracias que le damos a los estados cooperantes, hay algunos aspectos aquí que valdría la pena considerar. Por ejemplo, se ha hablado mucho de extender el número de las peticiones anuales de 50 a 70, a 100, no sé a cuántas, que requieren de un equipo, de un personal que hoy en día no tenemos, pero que en la resolución que está a consideración de esta asamblea, en la página 14, se prevé que esos fondos que se requieren para la contratación del personal salgan de contribuciones voluntarias. O sea, por un lado solicitamos aumentar el trabajo de la Secretaría y después dejamos a voluntarios pagar el costo que implican los recursos humanos que la Secretaría necesita. Creo que la Secretaría de la UNESCO debería reconocer que así como hace poco durante el Consejo Ejecutivo se habló de 100 vacantes que existen en esta organización y que van a ser llenadas, algunas de esas deberían ser pagadas con el fondo regular de la institución, porque estas no son funciones temporales, son funciones permanentes y más si queremos que la Convención responda a las solicitudes de los Estados miembros. Después, señor presidente, nos parece que las decisiones de ajuste del manejo del fondo en base a las decisiones del Consejo Ejecutivo no están a nuestra consideración. Son decisiones tomadas y no sé por qué las tenemos nosotros aquí como posibles de ser aceptadas o no. Y finalmente, me parece que el tema de las aspiraciones de los Estados miembros, de ampliar el programa a programas muy interesantes, hay una realidad. Si no tenemos el dinero, no se pueden hacer. Por eso, en el punto 14 de la resolución a consideración, el 15, sugeriría que se aplicara el costo de administración no al 7% de las otras contribuciones, sino al 10%, porque tenemos que tener un margen para poder nosotros cubrir esos gastos permanentes que requieren administrar los trabajos de nuestra convención. Gracias.
Merci beaucoup. Les Émirats Arabes Unis.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس. تعرب دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة عن امتنانها للأمانة العامة على الوثيقة الواضحة والغنية بالمعلومات التي تبين وضع الصناديق. كما ندرك محدودية الموارد والطلبات المتزايدة على هذا البرنامج. لقد أثبت الوباء أن عملنا يمكن أن يكون فعالا من حيث التكلفة، ولا سيما من خلال المنصات الرقمية. يجب أن نواصل العمل على اتخاذ إجراءات استباقية في السعي إلى إيجاد حلول إبداعية لمواصلة عملنا. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. La Chine.
Merci, 主席。中方很高兴看到基金得到有效使用，并产生积极效果，原则同意对基金财务条例修订案。中方自加入公约以来，在维护公约健康发展、提升公约影响力方面积极贡献力量。作为基金的最大贡献国之一，根据公约第26条的规定，中方坚持为保护非物质文化遗产基金按时足额缴纳义务分摊纳款。除此之外，还自觉承担额外责任，每年向基金自愿捐款5万美元。中方将继续忠实履行义务，提供力所能及的支持，同时呼吁各缔约国履行按时足额缴纳分摊纳款的责任，为提升公约影响力、维护公约的可持续发展作出贡献。谢谢。
Merci beaucoup. Enfin, la Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais tout d'abord féliciter le secrétariat pour la qualité des documents présentés. La Côte d'Ivoire se réjouit que le mécanisme d'assistance internationale soit amélioré. Nous savons que cela a été un problème pendant longtemps et que les États en avaient besoin de cette assistance internationale. Si c'est amélioré, c'est parfait. Nous sommes également contents que la politique des ressources humaines soit également améliorée. C'était un problème. Cependant, nous sommes inquiets du fait que les contributions obligatoires ne soient pas honorées par tous les États. Nous avons noté qu'au 31 décembre 2019, 82% des États parties n'avaient pas encore versé leur contribution pour 2019. Et sur ce point, nous demandons au secrétariat ce qu'il compte faire. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Les Philippines, finalement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. We thank the Secretariat for this report, and we note the positive trends in implementation of the fund, especially the international assistance mechanism. The fund is in a relatively healthy situation, but in view of the growing needs and demands, there remains a large amount of resources that have to be mobilized for ICH to achieve the critical mass and impact we all aspire for. We recall the discussions and the decision supported by a number of committee members at the last session of the committee, requesting the Secretariat to present a breakdown of expenditures under the famous budget line 3, other functions of the committee, itemizing by expected result the broad activities envisioned for this 20% portion of the budget. Seeing it on paper for the first time now, we believe this helps the General Assembly attain a useful bird's eye view of the importance of the work undertaken within this framework, including a range of initiatives and statutory activities. We think it is an improvement in terms of transparency, and states parties can now see how the budget is allocated in a more holistic manner. So we'd like to thank the Secretariat for providing this at this session. Thank you very much. At future sessions, perhaps indication of activities under each percentage would be useful information as well, or having a more detailed breakdown of activities under each result would be useful. Lastly, we'd like to note that a lot of the work of the Secretariat is being conducted through temporary contracts in view of the limited resources, as was highlighted by the distinguished delegate of Panama. In this regard, we'd like to ask how many temporary staff are working in the Living Heritage entity, and also with respect to secondments, how does the Secretariat ensure the avoidance of conflicts of interest between the international and sometimes very sensitive nature of the work undertaken in the Secretariat and the national interests of the sponsoring states parties of these secondments? Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Nous avons clos la liste des orateurs. Le secrétariat entre M. Curtis et M. Sarr, je ne sais pas qui a voulu la parole, en tout cas dans les deux cas. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I might answer some of the questions, I think, which are more about the content of the program. I think the first question was from Cuba, about how this can be developed in the field. I think if you look, the bulk of this fund is actually the international assistance, and we have now had 2 or 3 experiences of what we call the service modality, whereby in agreement between the receiving state and the particular UNESCO field office, the budget may be allocated to the field office to implement the program, and in this way field officers do have access to some of the funds under the international assistance. But it is, of course, the request comes from the state party, not from the field office, unlike, say, regular program where there may be a request from a field office within the budget. But this budget does not deal with the entire budget. It does not deal with the regular program budget, of course, which goes through the General Conference of UNESCO and the UNESCO Executive Board. So part of this can directly benefit the field. We have a couple of cases where that has been done, and that requires the submitting state to collaborate or coordinate with the field office concerned to submit what we call the service modality rather than the grant modality, in which case the UNESCO office may actually implement the full or part of the project. There was a question, I believe, about personnel and staff. I think I don't have the exact numbers of the percentage of staff who are funded by various extra budgetary means. Some of it is cost recovery. You have touched on that. For the policy of cost recovery, I'd let my colleague from BSP answer. But just to say that we do survive a little bit on cost recovery, some of it on projects. For the seconded and the loans, we follow the rules of UNESCO as established through the executive board. We pay particular attention to avoid conflict of interest situations so that staff are not dealing, in fact, we try to avoid it even within staff, but particularly for loans, they do not work on files that directly concern the country that has sent them. It's not so difficult to do, we just make sure that they don't work on those files. So I don't know if that answers the question to satisfactory. That's what we do, and we are very careful to avoid that. But we must say we appreciate and we support and we need, and it helps us a lot to have secondees. But we are sure that they don't work particularly on nomination files or other sensitive issues, then those are always systematically given to other staff. I don't know if I think those were most of the questions, unless my colleague Ibrahim Assar from BSP would like to take the floor. Thank you.
Mrs. Assar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I picked about three questions. The first one was from Kiva about the cost recovery. Yes, the Executive Board of UNESCO in 2018 revised the UNESCO cost recovery policy, introducing what we call the management cost rates, which varies depending on the nature of the agreement or in the nature of the funding modality. So for special accounts, a fixed rate of 7% was introduced, meaning on all voluntary contributions where we receive a fixed rate of 7% shall be applied. And this applies to all special accounts irrespective of the nature of the special account. But specifically with two special accounts, this one and the World Heritage Fund, because they have an assessed component, so the PSC does not apply to the assessed component, but all voluntary contributions attract a charge of 7%. What does the 7% cover? It covers overall organizational support, meaning finance, legal, HR, audit. So it does not go to field offices under the current policy. It only covers general organizational support, meaning the preparation of the accounts, the support from legal affairs, internal oversight, audit, and so forth. That's the current rate on the 7%. On the next question, I think Panava mentioned about the financial regulations, why it's being presented here, when in actual fact, the executive board has already decided. Let me clarify here. What the executive board has done was to develop standard model text of financial regulations that should be applied on all special accounts. But the General Conference did acknowledge that when it comes to special accounts with a governing body like this particular convention, it is the governing body of that particular convention that is responsible for the use of the resources as well as approving the financial regulations of the special account. So what we have done is to take the model text as approved by the executive board and present it based on the nature of this fund for your approval. And as my colleague has said in his introductory remark, there were only two changes, mainly regarding the governance, because if you look at the old special accounts, it does not talk about the governance of the fund, who's responsible for the approval of the fund. What is the role of the committee? What is the role of the General Assembly? What is the role of the Director General? This is what has now been clarified and we presented for your approval. So it's within your power to approve it. The Executive Board only approve a model that should be applicable across all special accounts, with it, especially the convention special accounts. So it's for your approval, just to clarify that. There was also a comment, I think about 3 on the assessed contributions. I can maybe briefly talk about it because it's presented in the final. Yes, obviously, there are assessed contributions, and these are obligations on member states to pay. There is mechanism to regularly remind member states about their areas and their obligations to pay. And these reports, outstanding areas, are also published regularly on UNESCO's website. In addition, also on the Article 26, paragraph 5, there is a provision talking about if member states fail in the payment of their contributions, for example, they will not be eligible to stand as a member of the committee. So there is a provision dealing with this when there are areas from member states. I think these were the three questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce que ces réponses satisfont les États qui les ont posés? Si oui, pouvons-nous passer à l'examen du projet de résolution? Y a-t-il une objection? Parfait. Vous avez le projet de plan d'utilisation des ressources à l'écran. J'aimerais que le projet soit là. Qu'on fasse comme ce qu'on a fait depuis ce matin. Si il n'y a pas de problème majeur dans les projets que vous avez lus, le plan que vous avez lu, comme quelqu'un l'a dit tout à l'heure, qui n'a pas eu la chance d'être comptable, est-ce que nous pouvons faire confiance au secrétariat et adopter l'annexe et le projet de résolution? Y a-t-il une objection? Je n'en vois pas, je m'empresse d'approuver. Merci beaucoup, nous avons adopté notre résolution et l'annexe qui va avec. Ceci met fin à l'examen du point 7. Il est 17h50. Le secrétariat, je pense que nous pouvons l'arrêter là et reprendre demain matin à 10h. Il est entendu que le bureau, notre assemblée se réunit avant en salle 6. Alors, le bureau se réunira demain matin à 9h30 en salle 6. Merci aux vice-présidents des Pays-Bas, d'Arménie, d'Équateur, d'Indonésie et de Palestine, ainsi qu'à notre rapporteur, M. Wael Abdelwahab, de bien vouloir être ponctuel afin que nous puissions commencer à l'heure prévue. En raison des mesures de distanciation physique que nous devons prendre, cette réunion sera exceptionnellement limitée aux membres du bureau. Les observateurs ne pourront malheureusement pas y assister. Je vous remercie de votre compréhension à cet égard. La session normale reprendra demain à 10h précises. Je vous remercie par avance de bien vouloir être ponctuel. Je vous souhaite à toutes et à tous une bonne soirée. Merci beaucoup.